not about the macro picture, it's about the micro then. So it's going to be interesting. First quarterfinal, Hunterace versus Perna. We're going to start with the Mage versus Priest. So when it comes to Hunterace, he is actually playing a Control Jaina with a Dragon Caller. And my favorite card that I think it's a definition of this deck, it's Dragon's Fury.
Yes. This is essentially what the entire deck is built around. How many copies of... We see Ice Block in Hunterace's opening hand. How many copies is he playing?
One.
He's playing one. Okay, so that's starting to become very common because obviously when you're playing Dragon's Fury, you don't want to dilute your deck with too many cheap spells. We've seen people mess around with Arcane Intellect, with Ice Block in either 1 or 2 copies. But you really don't want more than 2 or 3 spells that are, quote, low rolls from Dragon's Fury. You want to be hitting 5 very consistently with that card.
That is correct. Also, he's playing one Arcanologist, just tutor the Ice Block to his hand before he plays the Dragon's Fury, because then you have a guarantee that minimum damage from Dragon's Fury is 4. For 5 mana, 4 damage on the entire board, that is actually a good deal.
Yeah, I was looking at this deck, and doing the maths is actually quite complicated because of things like Arcanologist really changing the equation, and because like one of the other cards you would play is Arcane Intellect, which then changes the equation again because they're both card draw effects. But if you were playing, I believe, 2 copies of Arcane Intellect, 1 copy of Ice Block, and 1 Arcanologist, I worked out that like a Dragon's Fury on 5 is still like 80% plus to hit 5+ damage, which is still very, very consistent.
It is, but with this kind of deck, you just cannot have a mistake. No. Right? Because if you suddenly leave 2 minions around or something like that, you don't have the tempo to get back.
Right. But Hunterace isn't playing Arcane Intellect, right? He is just...
No. He only has Ice Block and then Polymorphs.
So he has insane consistency with at least 4+ with the Polymorphs in there as well.
He's playing more roadblocks that would just give him the time to draw more cards. So additional Tar Creepers and a Saronite Chain Gang. 1 Arcane Tyrant. But let's talk about the Priest now, because it has a nutty opening.
It does, yeah. Cleric into Shadow Ascendant is about as good as it gets in terms of tempo for this deck. They don't really play 1-drops outside of Cleric, so their consistency in snowballing the board is really not there. But yeah, Cleric into Shadow Ascendant is basically exactly what you want in this kind of matchup. And actually, in the matchup as a whole, I mean, I'd like to talk to Perna, and didn't get an opportunity to do so before this, and ask him whether Warlock was his ban strategy in groups. Because it might just be the case. He's up against Hunterace here. He's actually chosen to ban Hunterace's Paladin, which is a very, very solid control Paladin. Again, similar thing. Lots of board sweeps, lots of defensive options, lots of healing. So, essentially all across Hunterace's decks, Perna has problems, right? Because they are all designed to counteract aggressive strategies. So it might just be that, you know, he's kind of low-rolled his matchup here in the top 8, and he's got the guy in the tournament that his lineup is weak to. And I think that is a thread that's run through this whole tournament. Basically, everyone that I've spoken to about lineups has said there's one guy they don't want to face because their lineup ruins them.
It's kind of interesting because the entire field was just so diversified.
Yes, exactly. Right?
So, I mean, everyone is running Warlock, but that's not a surprise, but we had like 4 different archetypes. So, the metagame, I would say, is maybe not healthy, because that you can say that after like stabilization of the entire metagame, but it's nicely just diversified, and it's a lot of decks that you can just watch and enjoy and have a lot of strategy into each of them. All right, well, that Dragon's Fury now has a very high possibility of actually dealing a lot of damage, since Ice Block is already in hand, Polymorph is already in hand. So there are 2 Blizzards, 1 Flame Strike, 2 Fireland Portals, and 2 Meteors in the deck, apart from the 1 Polymorph. So there's like almost guaranteed board clear, unless something will have more than 7 HP.
Right. And the Shadow Ascendant is slowly ticking along to being able to make that kind of stuff happen. Perna has had a Twilight Drake in his hand for most of the game at this position, but I don't think you can fault him for just playing his hand out. Obviously, he could have just like gone for the big Twilight Drake strategy, like gone with Netherspite Historian earlier, so that replaced a card in his hand, use that to get more health on the Drake. But at that point, if you're not diversifying your pressure, well, then suddenly you just walk into a Polymorph, you walk into a Meteor. Like this Mage deck does really have all the options covered, so Perna dumping his hand and just going for maximum pressure early definitely looks like the right kind of line.
And also, he would lose on a dragon in his hand.
Yeah, right.
So there's a lot of connotation with every single play.
That Tar Creeper is a very irritating roadblock for him right now, and Hunterace is kind of just using this as a stalling tactic, see if he can create some board tension. Because yes, he does already have that Dragon's Fury in hand, and yes, he could just coin it out next turn and probably clear this entire board. But then he doesn't have a Dragon's Fury in his hand anymore, and you know that this deck, the Spiteful Priest, it can generate board states over and over and over again. You know, it can Spiteful Summoner you, it can Archivist for a free from Amber, it has Operatives, which are huge threats on their own, and then draw another huge threat from your opponent's deck if you get a good option. So Hunterace knows he's going to have to beat, 4 or 5 really strong board states this game if he's going to be victorious. So he can't just be dumping his Dragon's Fury super early to nuke the board.
Oh, that's a very good analysis, especially with snowballing Shadow Ascendant right now.
Yes.
Because that builds just a board position out of nowhere. Like those creatures here, they're usually not a big threat. It's like kind of annoying, but you don't really mind them. They're small. But the Shadow Ascendant suddenly building up that Terra Creeper to a 5-6 minion right now, that is annoying. And you still need to deal with the Cleric because the card advantage will be just piling up for Perna.
And I think you can kind of see the stress on Hunterace's face right now. I think his mind is just going through that entire process that I was just talking about. Like, for all of the reasons you just stated, he really wants to try and clear this board. But if he does so, it's one of his best resources in his entire deck gone.
Not sure if maybe even a Dirty Rat this turn. Ooh, unlucky. I mean,
yeah,
against this particular deck...
yeah, it's kind of hard to win a joust.
It's kind of hard to pull off the Raven, since your opponent has 2 8-mana cards and 2 10-mana cards, and you literally don't have a more expensive spell than 7.
Yes.
So...
unlucky.
Unlucky.
That is just a 2-2, I'm afraid.
What do you think about playing Dirty Rat into Doomsayer instead of the Raven?
I thought about it. But there's a chance that you don't change a great deal in terms of the net power on the board. If you pull out like a Draconid Operative or something like that, then it's a huge downside. But obviously there's huge upside for you as well. Exactly. If you pull out a Twilight Drake or a Spiteful Summoner.
Or even the Draconid Operative, because it doesn't get the battle
Sure.
cry.
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, he's definitely holding on to his Dirty Rat, trying to hit some key targets later on and neutralize their effects. And this Doomsayer, for now, like, it doesn't need the Dirty Rat behind it, right? Like, it's already a challenge. He can't kill it unless he does something else to this board state.
That Duskbreaker deals the same amount of damage to your own board than exactly your opponent, but at the same time, you still have your annoying board. And your opponent still has to clear it, but this time the Cleric is gonna get just pinged down. So I'm not sure about this move.
I mean, what was the alternative? You just had
That's the problem.
Yeah, you just had to give the board back. You just had to let the Doomsayer go off if you didn't make this play. Really unfortunate. And it's a great play from Hunterace as well. I was talking about how important it is to manage his resources, and he's dealt with the first board state using only a Doomsayer, essentially. He didn't use his Dirty Rat, he didn't use any AoE, he didn't use his Polymorph. He just played a Doomsayer, and Perna essentially had to clear his own board.
Yep. Very good move. Skull King, guys, in this matchup, kind of pointless.
Yep. That's
the thing about tech cards. In this metagame, especially when you don't exactly have an exact image of what is going to happen in most of the matchups, right? Because there might be so many different decks. You have no certainty that your tech card will actually be doing anything apart from having a body on the board.
Right.
And you can say that about a lot of cards in general. So, turn 6 Spiteful Summoner. Is that something you play? Actually, honestly, this is a question that might have a different answer. Since you have the Dragon Operative, maybe you just want to not pressure your opponent with something that on its own just can build such a high-pressure situation that you don't need any other card being played in that turn.
So I do like it in this board state. So you're gonna get an 8-drop or a 10-drop, which is somewhat likely to have above 6 health. Mm-hmm. Very likely to have above 6 health.
Yep.
Which means suddenly they're having to hit exactly Flame Strike or Firelands Portal to clear the board with a Dragon's Fury. So I like having it here because you've actually got it alongside other minions. If you were to, say, play the Draconid Operative, and then you force Hunterace to clear with the Dragon's Fury, then you just play Spiteful Summoner afterwards, well, then he can Meteor you or Polymorph you, right? And you haven't got any pressure left. Whereas this diversifies your board to the point where if he Polymorphs, you still get to hit him with a decent amount of damage afterwards. If he doesn't, then you still have your huge 8-drop left over from the AoE, ideally, but that's clearly not the case, because that is not a great outcome.
We could talk about not, maybe that's not a great outcome, but Rot Phase is actually, it has to survive the damage. So, if it happens, the Dragonfire will actually pull out the second Polymorph, then it's disastrous for Hunterace. Because not only you will just leave a legendary minion on the board, but you also will spawn a second one. So he is going to be pushed to use the Polymorph or the Meteor. Meteor right now. And the Meteor is not ideal as well. Because I really do believe if you just not hit the Dragon's Fury, you lose the game. But at the same time, it's like 9 out of 10 that you hit it.
He can hit the other copy of Dragon's Fury as well, right?
All right, that's 5 damage. Okay, so that I would have to count, but I don't really want to.
All right, good call.
Let's see. He's going for the Dragon's Fury.
It.
Will it hit me? Will it hit me? What? There's a Flame Strike. Okay, good for him. But I was really close to actually have a disastrous situation.
It was, and that's why I liked the Spiteful on that turn, because it was just likely to create that awkward position. It happened in a way I wasn't quite expecting. A 6 health minion that was a disaster if you low rolled. But there's a very good chance of getting a 7-8 health minion there, which suddenly becomes quite difficult for Hunterace to deal with effectively with one card.
Look at that pick from the operative.
Yeah, I mean, Medivh seems like a pretty reasonable card in this deck.
Yeah. You have 4 spells, each costing like 8 or 10 mana. That seems reasonable. Too bad it doesn't count as a cast spell.
When Archivist uses it? Yeah. That would be kind of nutty, yeah. I like this again from Hunterace, just contesting, doesn't overreact, doesn't use a Meteor, doesn't use a Polymorph. He's got plenty of time to play with still. Just contest the 5-6 with the 4-6. But he is not going to be pleased to see Medivh come down and hit the board. Yup, that's the face of a man who is unamused by the situation.
3 damage from that weapon is nothing to scoff. Well, this is the problem. Like, you have a deck that is based on removal, but your removal is kind of inefficient right now.
Yes.
And you have to pull some strings every single turn to clear that board, and you're going down fast in health, so you can't really allow your opponent to have anything to attack in the upcoming turn. So you'll be running out of resources, while Perna, with every single card in his hand, he's just going to build up the resilience of his board. Especially with those, Cabal Talon Priests, they might not look like much, but they kind of push Hunterace to use a Polymorph for a target that doesn't really require it, or a Meteor. And that, again, might be problematic because of the way that Perna can build up the board position. So he puts the most HP minion on far left or far right, and then the Meteor is not even that decent, right? Ooh. Well, now Meteor is gone. And Perna can just play free from Amber and get 2 8-drops. I mean, maybe even more expensive cards.
Yeah, I was watching this matchup play out in Twitch chat yesterday when I believe you and Raven were casting. And there were some very good players whose opinions I respect, saying that this is a decent matchup for Mage, and Mage is slightly favored. In my experience, it's a very strong matchup for Priest. Basically,
yeah, I would say exactly the same as
right, because of all the points that you just made. Like, you have so many tools to make awkward health totals for Mage to deal with, and Mage's removal does really have to function quite honestly in terms of, if you have a 10 health minion, they need to do 10 damage to it a lot of the time, minus those polymorphs that they play. So when you have Draconid Operatives that you can then land a Cabal Talon Priest on, when you have huge minions coming out from Free From Amber, suddenly, like, Dragon's Fury even rolling 7 just doesn't do enough in a lot of situations.
Yep. And the Violet Grub now with the Death Rattle effect. I mean, it's just a 7/7 minion right now, and that's good enough. And he actually used the weapon for the 1 damage.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great call as well, because reacting to the minions that he has, Now he has 13 damage on board, plus the 1 again from the weapon next turn, which gives him the proc next turn. It's actually a great spot.
And still an awkward piece to deal with, like 17 points of health. And even if you destroy the Violet Worm with damage, you didn't really do much since there's still 7 damage on board after that point. So ideally, you want to freeze it for X amount of turns, but at the same time, you need to build a board position where you want to win the game. And you have no way of doing that at the same time because you have not enough resources.
Yep. And this has gone downhill very quickly for Hunterace. You saw how effectively, you know, turns 1 through 5 or 1 through 6, he was able to hold back his resources. He didn't really use anything. He answered one board state with a Doomsayer, but then from the moment he was forced to use that Dragon's Fury, he's had to commit a valuable resource every single turn just to stop the pressure. And now he's kind of out of big answers.
Yep.
Fireland's Portal isn't a big enough answer against this deck a lot of the time.
Unless you get a Doomguard or Leo or Jenkins.
Sure. Yeah.
But sometimes that's still not enough. Look at that. Both minions have 8 and 9 HP.
Yep.
Like, how do you deal with that? And if the buff lands now on whatever, basically, you still have to deal with every single minion on this board.
Hunterace is in trouble. I think in the context of the series, the Priest winning is not a disaster for Hunterace. Of course, you don't want to lose any given game. But in the context of Conquest, there are important wins and unimportant wins. And I think Perna's Priest is the most likely deck to get a win against Hunterace's lineup, just because it has the most resiliency. You know, if the decks were to come up against Warlock, well, this is the deck that's, you know, packing a bunch of mind controls and stuff that can be cast to deal with Void Lords and so on. The deck that's able to discover Guldans and Nazoths from the opponent to then get repeated value out of those Void Lords that you've mind controlled. You know, you have game on top of just being aggressive against them. So if one of these decks was going to get a win, it would probably be the Priest. So him doing it at the first port of call is not a disaster for Hunterace. But you can see already, like, he's a very expressive player. He's not enjoying how aggressive this Priest is being able to be against him.
Maybe he's one of those guys that actually thinks that Mage has a better matchup here.
Maybe.
I mean, kind of joke here, but I honestly think that Priest has a better matchup than the Mage.
I completely agree with you.
So I'm kind of surprised by what we were told, you know, by other players. Because there has to be a reason why they think like that. And in those kind of matchups, you usually have... You need tempo swings from the Mage perspective to build up the board when you can secure a win condition.
Sure.
And you can do that by doing an example, you know, the Archon Tyrant, but he only has... Hunterace only has 1, and it's still just a 4/4 minion. So it's not like a big push, right? It requires a big setup.
Wow. That's vaguely amusing. The Raven Familiar that's completely useless for Hunterace's deck, the man who actually put it in his deck, is now picked up by Perna, who has a guaranteed proc of it.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. Ironic.
The level of respect
For the Artificer, right?
Yeah.
But in this situation, I honestly wouldn't really care that much, since your opponent already used so many resources. I think you can just keep it alive for one turn.
I kind of agree with you. You missed...
Just smash your opponent's face for 9. So even if he plays a Flame Strike next turn,
right,
you still dealt that damage, right? If Dragon's Fury gonna get played, the Artificial will die anyway, and you still dealt damage over that amount. That's one of the cards that could actually be a win condition against Priest, since after you land a huge board clear, and next turn you can play the Dragon Caller, then Priest doesn't really have much answers to a full board of 5/5s.
Nope.
There's literally no answer apart from double Dustbreaker.
Yes.
So
and one has already been used, and you saw one Netherspite Historian card as well, which wasn't a Dustbreaker. So,
but the problem is you need to find time to actually play those, and they need to threaten lethal next turn.
Yes.
Otherwise, it might be not good enough. And it's a legendary card, so you can reliably play it in this matchup to win the game. but I don't think you have any other options.
It's a really tough turn. I think everything you said was accurate, but at the same time, he's forced into a position, is Hunterace, where he has to play it now so that it essentially functions as his board clear for this board. And he's gonna he's gonna give up his ice block some of the time to this. But he is threatening 15, 19, 22 damage exactly on the backswing. So Perna can't just go face with everything to pop the block and leave that stuff there if he doesn't have a defensive play. Hunterace knows there's a mind control in hand for Perna that can at least be some form of removal if he does want to go face and pop the block. But if he goes face with everything, he then still only has 20 damage. So if he goes face with 20 damage and then casts mind control, then the block isn't getting popped. This is actually a really very awkward board state that Hunterace has set up this turn when you break it all down.
At the same time, I don't think Perna needs to be super fast with the ice block right now.
I agree, yeah.
Doesn't really matter that much if he breaks it this turn or next turn, since he already he's in control from the beginning of the game. So whenever he just pushes for some damage every single turn and just clears off the board, just keeps the pressure piling on, I think he's in a good position.
Look how much gas he just still has left as well.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, like the card advantage from Priest. There. That's a mini stat line.
Firelands does allow him to get through the Tar Creeper or take care of the Eldritch Horror. Is that the name of that card?
Eldritch
What are you
Horrors.
called, sir? Yes. Okay.
What to do?
Well, it just also allows him to just kill the Talon Priest. You can go for the Tar Creeper just with the attacks, right? So that's the
you can value trade
from
the
the
Tar
Shadowcaster.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking how maybe it's more important to just kill the Kobold Skullbane. That's not an easy turn. I mean, you need to sacrifice a lot of your resources. I would say you probably start with Firelands Portal right now just to see the spawn. Maybe it does affect your board state.
Sure. Yeah, Doomguard can definitely change the equation for sure.
Well,
So then he double value trades. The 4-2 kills the 6-4. And then he cannot prevent a block pop here.
unless he goes for the Dirty Rat instead of the Acolyte of Pain.
Sure.
But then there's always Mind Control.
Yeah, he knows there's a mind control in hand, yeah. So that never does it. Making it just more valuable to play the Acolyte, get himself towards, second Dragon's Fury that he's probably going to need, and then eventually Frostlich Jaina, which he's certainly going to need at some point. Or at least, is he playing Alex Strasser in his list as well?
Yes, he has Alex Strasser.
Okay, so that can be the stabilization that he needs as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be Frostlich Jaina, but he's going to need one of those cards at some point.
He has still 13 cards left in that deck. That's the problem with the Control Mage. It's a control deck, but it doesn't have card draw.
Right, especially when you're not playing the Arcane Intellects, because Acolyte of Pain, try as you may, even though you feel like you can just play it and ping it every game, you can't a lot of the time. You're under too much pressure. So getting it to consistently draw 2 like Arcane Intellect would is kind of a problem in this deck.
And I love the Spellbreaker this turn. Just to deny the card draw, that's a super important move. You know that your opponent doesn't have anything relevant in his hand. So denying him the chance to get something relevant is absolutely crucial. Good Meteor placement as well.
Yeah, it's not super important because the trade is always there for the kitty. But yeah, it is technically right.
But at least you push the kitty to kill the one.
Yeah, exactly.
What to do? What to do?
But he did get the removal on the horror. And without that, would have been kind of tricky to do anything.
You can see Hunterace really just wears his heart on his sleeve in terms of his emotions during a game. We heard Orange yesterday kind of scolding himself for revealing how he was feeling on stream. He said that he hasn't really done that for a while. It's something that he'd learned to conceal. And at one point, his reaction to Atarim, he kind of freaked out and smacked the desk a little bit. But Hunterace is just he's just all emotion all the time. He's making faces on every single turn essentially.
Oh, that's an interesting move. So he plans on getting Jaina next turn and use the coin to ping it because he knows that he needs the card. The lifesteal as soon as possible.
Even more than that, if he kills the cleric and then meteors, he's got a 5/4 on the board. He knows his opponent has a mind control. His opponent can just mind control the 5/4 and he has no answer to
That's
the 5/4.
also interesting. Yeah, those 2 points are something that you usually don't take into consideration, but in this case, actually makes so much sense for Hunterace to have both defensive and offensive option at the same time.
Smart.
Very well played.
So smart. Chat, of course, is screaming misplay lol right now, but I assure you that although we did not see it until after the fact, that is almost certainly correct.
Oh, man. Now he has a really bad draw. But keeping that coin to this point was also crucial.
Yes, it's very true.
That allows you to get 2 water elementals for the upcoming turn if you get the Jaina from the top of the deck. And in that situation right now, when Perna is actually running out of threats, slowly, would be a game breaker.
Mm-hmm.
What to do? What to do?
Still kind of a problem.
Yep. I mean, he has to rip the rat this turn and just hope.
Yeah, but he knows there's
He knows the mind control's there.
so he's dead.
Yep.
There's no way out for Hunterace, unfortunately. It was a cute play with that meteor, but and the trade. Unfortunately, he did get the Raven. So that's a little bit unlucky. That's like a blank card.
His only play is to hope that the... Oh, no, it wouldn't work. I was about to say hope that the Glimmerroot had given him Doomsayer, and then you dirty rat out the Doomsayer to clear the board, but it can only be class cards from Glimmerroot, so that wouldn't work.
Yeah.
GG. The BM 10 armor at the end as well.
Yep. That was a... I wanted to say close game, but it wasn't a close game. I mean,
It was, it was a long game, which you can sometimes confuse with a close game. But no, it was pretty one-sided throughout. But I think even then, like, you saw, because of how much Hunterace was struggling and how much he had to improvise plays, you saw like how smart this dude is in terms of like how far he's thinking through in terms of like what the correct line is each turn.
That move with the trade with the tiger, with the Sabertooth, wasn't really impactful in the game because nothing evolved from it.
Right.
But at the same time, it would have been maybe a game-winning play if he would just get Jaina from the top of the deck.
Yep.
And that was the crucial move that some players would have just missed, and then you lose the game instantly. While Hunterace, with that move, would have actually won the game.
Yeah, I mean
that's a big difference, right?
Yeah, I mean that kind of play only changes the outcome of a game of Hearthstone, like single-digit percentages, very very low, but. If you keep making plays like that and you keep doing it every single time, that's how you eventually add like 5 to 10% overall to your win rate. And that's why, the very, very best players are rocking, 70% win rates, and good players are rocking 60% win rates.
All right, well, next matchup is Perna with the Paladin. And just to remind you guys, we're playing Conquest format, not Less Hero Standing. So every single player needs to win with each of his class that is not banned. And for the first time, I think, in the entire HCT tournament right now, I'm going to be casting a Control Warlock. I don't know if that's the same for you.
It's the exact same. I don't think we saw a single one on stream yesterday.
Every single player is bringing Warlock, different Warlocks, but whenever someone has a Q-Block or a Control Warlock, it seems like they're just drawing those bans pretty heavily.
Oh boy. This hand, though.
That is kind of snowbally. And if that chum gets the Vial of an Inquisitor as well. Yikes.
You mean like that?
Yeah.
You mean like that, Lothar?
Like that.
Okay.
I'm really good at that.
Yeah, we coin out a 2/4.
Hunterace was not impressed. He just,
just yawned.
Yeah. Okay. It's just a 2/4, but suddenly it's going to be at 3/5, most likely.
All right. There's a curve.
All right, well, that seems actually pretty impressive. But the Spellbreaker is a good draw, but at the same time, this is the only deck from Perna that has double Spellbreakers.
That's true. That is true. Yeah, Hunterace definitely has a lot of stalling power now with Stonehill Defender into Saronite. Stonehill will then pick up another Taunt. He can then even go Rin if the Possessed Lackey doesn't go off, which is likely that it's not going to. So he can, again, stretch out his removal options pretty far just by putting kind of irritating Taunt minions in the way.
If I interrupt you, there was a Hungry Etin, a Tarlurker, and a Sunwalker. And he picked up the Tarlurker just because, of course, the amount of health that it has.
Yeah. And probably just curve reasons as well. He doesn't want like another 6-drop taunt because he can just play Rin on that turn anyway. He does have the Lackey on 5, but he might be under too much pressure to a Spellbreaker if he just drops the Lackey. So I think the Tarlurker makes a lot of sense. But go back to the matchup point. I was super impressed watching Zump play a Control Warlock when he won DreamHack recently, because he had this very unique build, kind of similar to what Hunterace is running, where it was just a million taunt minions. It just had every taunt minion you could possibly think of playing in there. And all he did is just every single turn where, you know, every player in the game would have used an AoE or a removal, he just played another taunt and just kept being annoying. And then, you know, that stretched out the value of his Twisting Nethers and his Hellfires and Defiles to, like, ridiculous points where he was just picking up insane turns with them. And to beat this kind of start from a Murloc Paladin, that's probably what you're going to have to be doing as well.
The Twisting Nether might be actually the MVP here.
Yes.
I actually would like to talk about the previous turn from Perna, because there was a temptation to just play the Rockbull Hunter last turn, to just go through the Stonehill Defender with just 1 attack and push for 2 damage. But at the same time, keeping a better curve for turn 4 with a 2-drop and maybe another 2-drop or just the hero power seems to be more effective. And at the same time, he would have been also able to push through both of those Saronite chain gangs right now with the Rockbull Hunter on one of those 2-attack minions. So he had a lot of options actually when it comes to attack utilization and his stats distribution. So that was a crucial move not to use it last turn, just not to be tempted just because you can push for 2 damage. That's like a short-term gain that can be detrimental to the long-term solution to the entire game plan.
Yep.
Small stuff, but it actually matters in the long term. And it's super awkward now for Hunterace to actually deal with also this board, because how do you deal with 4 HP minions if you already had used 1 Mortal Coil? You don't have a Defile yet, so that Hellfire. It's actually not that great. It's gonna buff the Amethyst, but it's gonna be a little bit awkward. So I guess you need to just go for the taunt minions, as you said, to draw out more minions and then clear them when you get to a bigger clear. I think that kind of begs for the Spellbreaker.
Yep.
But at the same time, Perna would rather just silence the Void Lord itself.
I mean, this is a tutor effect as well, right? So you can Spellbreaker this, and there's, you know, every chance that the Void Lord just never comes into play. You know, if he's playing the Lackey, you know that there's at least 1 Void Lord still in the deck, which means there can only be maximum 1 in the hand, and then suddenly, you know, Skull of Minari isn't really that impactful if the cards aren't in your hand. You have to draw them and then play them out later. If you're going to hard cast them, that's on turn 9, and we're at the point where, like, Perna's probably just killed him by then. So I think silencing the...
I'm not saying it's a bad move, but in general, you'd rather prefer the tempo move of, you know, your opponent's sacrificing an entire turn, playing a 9-mana minion, and then you just go through with Spellbreaker and push.
Yeah. It's so irritating playing against Control Warlock with an aggro deck. Just, you know, constantly calculating what the implications of, like, Defile and Defile with Coil. Now turn 6 is when you really have to consider everything, because you're then thinking about, you know, Spellstone Defile, Coil Defile, Hellfire Defile. Like, every single combination comes into play. And then there's, like, the minions that your opponent can play as well to find the breakpoints for the Defile. Like, this... Defile is such an incredibly like well-designed card, just in terms of like the skill cap of it, because the skill cap applies to both players. It's not just the guy using it; it's the guy that has to play around it the whole time.
We need more cards like those. I mean, not exactly like the same effect, but the way...
Defile in every class!
But the way it just affects the board state and the way you play the game, those are good cards. I was thinking about playing the Dirty Rat first, then to Hellfire, but what you can pull out of it would be an example, a Bitter High Hydra, so that would be kind of weird. A Gentle Magazine would have also be kind of weird, but every other menu would have died. So there was a huge chance that you just get something that instantly dies from the Hellfire. I'm not sure if it was worth it, but at the same time, Hunterace is losing 0 to 1, so it would have had a low roll from the Dirty Rat, from the Dirty Rat, then he can just be in a very bad spot in match-wise.
Yeah, I can see the argument both ways for sure. Because obviously the other thing that you did mention is, of course, you're then dealing damage to your own Dirty Rat. So then suddenly, you know, if you have a 2/3 on the board, this 3/1 that he's left behind just kills the 2/3 that you've left behind, right? So you kind of devalue your own Dirty Rat that way around as well. So there's a lot of arguments.
Still pushing 9 damage with a kind of weak board is important, because something that he was doing while playing the previous game is exactly the same. You need to have some pressure, but still keep your other, minions in your hand to have a way of replaying threats on the board next turn after a board clear. But the problem with this deck is that the power level of your minions is not as high as with the priest deck, and you lack cards, impactful cards like Spiteful Summoner.
Yes.
You have Call to Arms, of course, which is fantastic, but only after your opponent like use both Hellfires or Defiles, Twisted Netters, and other removals, which is kind of tough.
When there are a lot of them.
Yeah.
So Hellfire has to come down here, I think. It's just a matter of whether you tap or Librarian with it or anything like that. The Spellstone... you could just Spellstone the War Leader. I guess that's fine.
You get 5 HP, you go to 11, you decrease the damage on board by 6-9.
I feel like the Hellfire just wins the game more often, though. Like, yes, you can die this turn to, Rallying Blade number 2. But yeah. Yeah, I like taking the risks here.
Knife Juggler might be a chance right now, but actually scratch that. There's no Knife Juggler in Perna's list.
Does he have Unidentified Maul?
No.
Okay.
And now he knows he's not dead. Ooh, eye for an eye? Not really. Getaway Kodo might be the choice for Perna if he wants to get, redemption next turn. An example from his Hydrologist.
Yeah, so actually looking at Perna's list, this is almost certainly the best play from Hunterace, because he only dies to Rallying Blade number 2. There's no Knife Juggler, there's no Unidentified Maul, as we were talking about, whereas if he went for, just playing a Taunt or just Spellstoning the War Leader, then suddenly, Megasaur can kill him, Blessing of Kings can kill him, Tarim can kill him if he goes for the Taunt line. Yeah, Hellfire and the Librarian definitely looks like the right line.
So this is an awkward turn, because he has to use the Spellstone, get 7 HP back. He's going to be back at 8, but he cannot do anything with the other 2 minions. So if he goes for... Wait, was a consideration to go for Tap Defile? Probably not, since the other minion was 3 HP, right?
Yep.
So no, there's no way you can just pull off a Defile here for this board.
So if he does nothing here, then he is only dead to Gentle Megasaur next turn? No, he's dead to Blessing of Kings as well next turn.
Yeah. That gives a lot of outs.
Yeah. If he taps, though, then that also enters Rallying Blade into the equation, and it creates... does it create any more outs for Gentle Megasaur? Yes, it creates +1/+1 as another out for Gentle Megasaur as well.
All right, well, next turn, 9 mana. That's the Void Lord coming in. But it doesn't allow Perna to push for any damage unless he gets the second Spellbreaker. And that second Void Lord is getting drawn right now.
Do you... I confess I didn't see the options of the
Those
Hydrologist.
Getaway Kodo and Noble Sacrifice.
Okay, I was going to ask if one of the options was Repentance, because it would be a very forward planning play.
Repentance would have been awesome.
Because you are literally, if you take Repentance, you play Repentance, you're banking on Hunterace doing what he did, which is just having a removal turn and not playing a minion, and then you're playing around the Void Lord the turn after. But if that wasn't an option, then that wasn't an option.
So many different plays, so many different draws for Perna that he could have drawn. But unfortunately, he didn't get either Megazord, neither a Blessing of Kings, neither Spellbreaker.
Yeah, he still has Spellbreaker number 2.
So he doesn't want to kill it this turn, because then there's no difference, because always Hunterace can just kill it and play cooldown. So, actually, there's a difference, because 3 Void Walkers will get additional damage. Attacks next turn.
Actually, the amount of... Oh, baby. The amount of key cards that Perna hasn't hit. Like, obviously, he had a couple of hits for lethal on one turn, and then obviously he had the Spellbreaker there that he could have drawn. But he has 2 copies of Divine Favor in his deck, and he hasn't drawn either of them to this point, which would be potentially game winning as well. Sunkeeper Tarim is massive in the matchup in a lot of positions. Hasn't found that either. Didn't find Call to Arms to flood the board early. No Megasaurs, as you said. Like, he's essentially just been playing this game with the entire early curve of his deck. He's just had small Murlocs the entire game.
And Hydra.
And this one Hydra, yeah.
And not a set of small minions. Well, sometimes that's how it is.
Yep.
That Gul'dan, though, is like a last seal, but not from Rin. It's
Yes.
just gonna snowball now with the health points and additional removal. It's kind of crazy. It's like you have a built-in Dark Bomb with built-in Lifesteal. That is worth the same mana, and you don't lose card advantage. That is bonkers good.
Yes, it is. That is indeed, Lothar. Bonkers.
Yeah. Well, I guess you can just Twisting Nether and just 3 damage your opponent's face.
Yep. Hunterace knows this is eye for an eye at this point, so that's something that he has to factor as well.
Then he can actually just attack with
He just
Resident
pokes
Void
for
Walkers.
1 first, yeah.
You can set up just lethal for next turn. With double attacks into Hydra. That's 6 damage. It will be 1 off, right?
So he does 6 more and then 2 more from here. So
no, that's lethal for next
he sets up lethal for next turn. Hunterace caught the sequencing as well. He was about to lead with attacking into the Hydra and then realized that would make him take 3 damage from the eye for an eye because of the Hydra damage. And then quite rightly attacked with the Void Walker first to just take 1. And there you go, puts him to 3, nudges. He's clearly calculated that there is no lethal set up through this position, and now all he has to do is ping face again next turn.
Actually, there was a chance of lethaling next turn for Perna. if you were to get Divine Favor into Megazord with Wind Fury and another Murloc, that would have been lethal.
I'll take your word for it. I'm not going to check your maths, but I believe you. It sounds about right. Colossally unlikely, though. Not something that you're going to play.
But it wasn't
around,
out.
Right? Yeah, sure. I hear you. But Hunterace does square up the series now, 1-2-1. And I think both of these games so far have been played at a very high level. Just the level of thought process from both players, at least, you know. It's very easy to say, you know, Perna has just been playing his Murlocs on curve or whatever in that series, but he had so many things to consider. You know, this is something that I don't think aggro players get quite enough credit for, is that, yes, the control players have all of these options and ball clear availabilities to them. Well, for every one of those options that's available to the control player, the aggro player has to consider them as well and play around them in the right position. And I think it would be unfair to make this sound, you know, one-sided and that Hunterace is doing all the work, but he has looked very, very impressive in some of the situations that he's grinded himself out of.
Both archetypes, aggro and control, can be, you know, snowbally, and you just play 1, 2, 3, 4 and just win.
Yeah.
And it happens to both sides.
Mm-hmm.
That's the nature of card games. Some games, even when you play, in theory, a easy deck, it can be challenging because of the way you need to play around your opponent's cards. So,
did you say something about 1, 2, 3, Lothar?
1, 2, 3, and then dead. This is the Blood Imp deck from Perna, but we didn't see a Blood Imp yet.
Also, Vicious Fledgling. This was a very popular card in aggressive decks a little while ago because of how effective it was against priests in particular. You know, priest essentially had to like Shadow Pain it, or they had to dump their silence on it and just leave it there as a 3/3.
Yeah.
And this was a Highlander deck, so they only had one copy of each of those to really counteract it. But it melted away fairly quickly. Honestly, like as soon as it became standard, it seemed to disappear again. But Perna has it back in his zoo here, and it's going to be pretty devastating against the deck that, you know, by design doesn't really play a ton of removal.
It's a win condition on its own.
Yeah.
But when you consider a card for 3 mana, a win condition on its own, it's a high risk, high reward card. Maybe not that high risk.
I was going to say, what's the risk exactly?
Just play a 3 mana, 3/3 minion that can, worst case scenario, be a vanilla minion, just die to removal. So if it gets a Frostbolt, not bad. If it gets an Amethyst, not bad. If it gets any kind of removal, it's not a strategy. You still have other cards in your deck. Especially in Warlock, where they gained cards like Cobalt Librarian, still have access to life tap. You have so much refill possible for the deck. Ooh.
Coin Spider Tank.
And there's the new card, quote unquote, Fungalmancer, the, as you said, replacement from Ornmer.
Yep. I believe Muzzy hit Super High Legend playing Zoo with Fungalmancer in it. Like maybe like rank 3. I just default to rank 3. I just assume Muzzy's always rank 3. That's a really old meme at this point. But I think he may have actually got to rank 3 Legend with it, and you know posted specifically on Twitter saying that Fungalmancer felt incredibly strong.
Well, this allows for a trade with the Crazy Alchemist, but that's not really a good choice. And this is slightly annoying. Like, you can't really deal with the Fledgling. So, yikes.
You love my new recipe.
If that Fledgling hits a Wind Fury right now and then goes into stealth, might be a huge problem for Hunterace. There's a consideration to just to kill the Cleric with the Fledgling instead.
I guess, like, go back to the risk-reward thing that you were talking about. If you did want to be super nitpicky, like, this is the risk of playing Fledgling, right? Is that you have to hit face with it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, you know, conventional good Hearthstone tells you to take good trades when they're available.
Especially against cards that kind of give card advantage to your opponent.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Divine Shield. Okay, that's a good choice as well, because that allows you to trade with the Flame Imp anyway, and then the Fledgling still is kind of untouchable. Unless your opponent buffs his minions with both Divine Spirit and Inner Fire, or just Inner Fire on its own on the Cleric, but then the Cleric dies with the trade, which isn't terrible, especially when you still have other minions on the board that are paired up for the Fungal Mancer next turn.
Yes. Decision time for Perna. If he wants to protect the Fledgling, he does have to kill the 4-1 as opposed to taking a buff and value trade kind of situation with the Demon Fire. I do like that decision. This Fledgling definitely has the potential to carry from this point if it's unanswered.
What do you think about the second Librarian instead of the Blood Imp? Because that doesn't give you a stealth minion for Fungal Mancer next turn.
Very true.
So if your opponent doesn't have an answer to the Fledgling, then the Fledgling will be alive, but the other 2 minions will most likely die. Mm-hmm. So do you play the Fungal Mancer next turn because of that, or you just go for other options? Like you would have Blood Imp and Crystal Weaver, an example. If you could have even go for Blood Imp and Demon Fire instead of the Life Tap the previous turn. There were so many options during that turn, actually.
There was. Hunterace just going fishing. He needs a Duskbreaker stat.
I really think the Blood Imp could have been a consideration instead of the second Librarian.
I guess the thinking is that he could always just like Blood Imp Crystal Weaver as a follow-up anyway, and then that's his baseline for the Fungal Mancer turn, the turn afterwards. But yeah, it definitely looked promising. You know, we were talking exactly about this being the reason why Blood Imp started getting played, because, you know, with so many buffs in the deck now, even specifically for demons, having the stealth minion is a big advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, the Wind Fury has been picked up.
And the stealth allows Perna to push for damage next turn, and there's... How many tons do we have in the Priest from Hunterace? Let me check. We have Tar Creeper, 1. 1 Tar Creeper. Native Spider Historian can get a taunt, but it will be the cheapest taunt dragon, will be 9 mana.
It's like Sleepy Dragon now, right?
Yeah.
Is it? Wow.
Oh, no, wait. Book of Him hasn't taunt. I don't think there's any other dragon with taunt. So basically, that's the only option, the Tar Creeper. So it's guaranteed damage for the Fledgling, and that will allow you to deal minimum 6. You can push for Fungal Mancer. So now the Blood Imp with the stealth will also allow you to push for 3 damage minimum. Mm-hmm. You can also play the Demon Fire. No, Fungal Mancer is just the best play. So you have minimum 13 damage next turn. If you get at least +1 attack on the Fledgling, you win the game.
What do you even do now as Hunterace? If you heal your Alchemist, you can't hit Duskbreaker anyway. Duskbreaker doesn't even really do as much as you need it to on this board state. It kills the Blood Imp and the Crystal Weaver after you trade your things into it. The Fledgling survives, but it's all irrelevant anyway. He just can't access a Duskbreaker this turn.
Well, there will be a lot of damage coming in. Fungal Mancer to secure the win on the back of a Fledgling.
Yup. 10 going through, plus 4 and 1. Just pick one, whatever you feel. There it is. 2-1 to Perna. Hunterace again, just another game where he was scrapping for defensive plays and they just didn't really appear for him. And that deck looked very impressive. Honestly, it got over the line very, very smoothly. As I mentioned, like Vicious Fledgling against Priest is the whole reason it really started to appear in every aggro deck, because Raza Priest became the deck to beat. And Raza Priest just has to Shadow Word Pain that thing, or else it's going to live and hit them.
Or just silence.
Yep.
And that's awkward as hell.
Yep.
Because there's still 3/3 body left on the board, and especially for Zoo, which can buff the minions, right? It's good enough.
Yeah, and Hunterace, you know, is even in an even worse position than that because, of course, he's playing the kind of new school Dragon Combo Priest. No Shadow Word Pains in there. He just has that one copy of Silence. Outside of that, he just has to be able to contest it with minions if he's going to deal with it. Find some Potion of Madness setup to make it happen. Even then, there's only one copy of that. So Vicious Fledgling looks at like a pretty sick tech choice for an aggro deck in this tournament.
Seems like it. And Perna now is 1 game point away from securing his advancement to the semifinal. Well, this is definitely a worse opening hand from the previous one we had.
Just about.
But still, the Divine Favor against the Mage might actually be important, but this is the Control Mage without an actual card draw, apart from the Acolyte of Pain, but this time he actually has it.
Right.
So
this time he also has Jaina as well, which means if he gets to those awkward situations he got to in the late game last time around, where he's just about reduced the board pressure, he now has Jaina to fall back on. You know, if there was an Alex or a Jaina in hand in that game for Hunterace, he might have been able to set out his stall a little bit differently and stabilize on the last few turns, but there just wasn't.
kind of thinking about his situation for turn 2. He either can just curve up with the Rockbull Hunter, and then next turn Vilefin into Inquisitor will allow him to build up a board with 3 Murlocs for the Cold Light Seer to buff plus 6 HP instead. If he goes for the Inquisitor right now, then he can play the Rockbull Hunter for +1/+1, or just curve out with the Cold Light Seer, and on turn 4 go for the Hero Power and the Rockbull Hunter.
Yes. It's interesting. I thought about the hero power play, like hero power into Inquisitor, hero power into Rockpool, hero power, as you were saying. But I think he probably wants to Kings on 4, which is the reason why he turned that line down. So, you know, I guess this makes sense to him as well. Well, that fixes his hand quite nicely.
Yep. One amount of cards are just those fixes of situations where you have to consider what do you want to do with the curve for the next 2 turns. But then this fixes the entire situation. I also like the diversification of threats. Now the Inquisitor is a threat on its own with the 2 attack, while the Tidecaller is still at something that needs to be, dealt with as soon as possible. Otherwise, it's just gonna be buffed to infinity.
Sure.
And beyond.
And beyond. So now, since he has maintained the wide board of Murlocs, looks like he's going to go Seer instead of Blessing of Kings, which makes sense. Again, more threat diversification, but he does potentially walk into the Coin Dragon's Fury now.
Dragon's Fury might be a problem, especially since Polymorph now is getting drawn and Hunterace. If he doesn't get the Polymorph out of Dragon's Fury, that clears the entire board. Oh wait, there's an Ice Block still.
There's an Ice Block still, yeah.
But he needs to go for it. So if he hits the Ice Block or the Polymorph, might be a little bit disastrous. Let's see what he gets. Another Dragon's Fury. That's good enough. So I'm assuming this time Perna will just need to go for the Divine Favor. Oh, definitely. Oh no, interesting. All right, that might be a consideration. Right, he's correct because the deck from Hunterace is practically curving out almost every single turn. So there's only be... Hunterace probably will not play 2 cards next turn.
Sure. But with Perna's hand, I mean, his hand is Blessing of Kings, double Divine Favor, so it's kind of hard for him to get more Divine Favor value than he would have done that turn as well.
I'm guessing he just wants to have some board position, so he can maybe play Blessing of Kings next turn instead of the Divine Favors.
Sure, I can see that. Yeah, it makes sense. The goal being Kings plus the card you draw into then on the next turn, the card you draw plus a Divine Favor for maximum value. Because as you said, Hunterace will have drawn 2 more cards by that point and probably at most played 3 cards,
Yep. Although now he has 2 Artificers, and those can make a difference.
Wow.
So this might hurt a bit because the Blessing of Kings can be played next turn.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like Hunterace is just playing around Divine Favor right now. I think that's
you
what
think
he's
so?
doing, yeah.
Okay.
I think he just wanted to play cards that turn.
Really? Well, I guess that makes sense when you hero power. And you will and you have the trade on board already.
Mm-hmm.
Living Spores, I think it's the best option right now because you spawn 2 more minions from the sheep right now, so actually Hunterace didn't get that much from the polymorph.
Right. +3 attack just doesn't do anything because
Your opponent can just fire ping.
Well, he'd also he needs to kill the artificer.
Yes,
So he'd have to trade with the Murloc that he's buffing anyway. So then he just leaves one behind that, as you said, can be pinged off.
Did he actually destroy any cards?
No, right?
No.
There's nothing.
There's nothing for 1 mana when it comes to spells for Perna. So just a big body. I guess this is the moment when you need to play Divine Favor instead of just going for the Righteous Protector and the Hero Power. It will net you 4 cards. So for 3 mana, 4 cards is actually a decent point. Wow.
So much greed.
It's kind of weird to say greed about, not playing the most greedy card, which is Divine Favor.
Sure.
Kinda. So, but it is like a reverse greed for Perna. He just wants to, basically what he does with this play, he wants to avoid losing his Megazord next turn to the Skulking Geist. But it's kind of weird because Hunterace is actually a deck that is just filled with removal. And it's turn 7, so options like Flame Strike, Violence Portal, Second Dragon Fury are all available to Hunterace.
And I'm definitely not criticizing him, Perna being very greedy with his Divine Favors here, because I think you made a great point earlier, which is Hunterace, I think, has endeavored to try and play around Divine Favor as best he can. Again, you see him just playing the maximum amount of cards he could have done this turn. But it's 2. It's really not a lot. He can't play around Divine Favor effectively. By design, his deck costs 1 million mana. It just does.
Yep.
I think we'll see a nod of recognition when Divine Favor does get cast here, though. I think Hunterace has been expecting it.
Ooh, that time. So it depends on what kind of secret will the Hydrologist pick. Then we'll either see the secret being played, or we're gonna see a hero power instead. Redemption. Is it impactful?
Not
really.
hugely so, no.
Repentance doesn't really make much of a difference as well.
I don't think the secrets are particularly good in this matchup, honestly. Eye for an Eye was classically considered very strong against Ice Block Mages, just because of the kind of checkmate situation you can get to when you get them down to 1 HP. But now, it used to be just Alexstrasza that could play around that. Now it's Alexstrasza, it's Artificer, it's Frostlich Jaina. They have so many ways to mitigate Eye for an Eye, although both of the Artificers have been used already by Hunterace.
But it's going to a turn when Jaina will just be played next turn on board. And from that point, every elemental is a huge problem for Perna.
Yep.
Lifesteal's ability that cannot be silenced, an example.
Yes. Specifically, Jaina's lifesteal is something that can't be silenced, yes. Because it's a board aura like the Quest Rogue 5/5s. It's just like an aura that's cast on your side of the board. You can't silence it off any given minion.
This is really awkward.
It's just no pressure this turn. It's just not enough. 3 damage in play plus a redemption. Hunterace says, thank you very much. Have a Frostlich Jaina. Yep, quickest turn he has played all series.
Well, Tarim now will come in handy. Or maybe not. Tarim allows to trade with the Relying Blade. And you can even go for... Okay, this is a tricky turn. You might also value the second Divine Favor right now. So goes for the Eye for an Eye into Divine Favor just to get, you know, the potential card draw right now. No, not as well. All right.
I don't know if you caught Hunterace, but once he played that turn with the Frostlich Jaina, there was a big exhale, just a big release of breath. So I think he feels like he might have got there, turned the corner at this point with that Jaina coming down really pretty much unpressured completely. But he has been faced with another huge board, which is something that Murloc Paladin just always surprises people, just how many different board states it can create. It feels like they should run out of gas much, much quicker than they actually do.
Well, this time we can put the blame on the Divine Favor.
Of course, yeah. But, you know, that is a card that you have to contend with. It's an aggro deck that, you know, is unlikely to run out of cards, especially when you play 2 copies of Divine Favor, which isn't 100% standard by any means, but it is what Perna is choosing to go for with this lineup. Again, it's kind of fitting with that idea that he's willing to take on some control decks with this aggro lineup. He's got Spellbreakers. He's got double Spellbreaker in this deck alongside double Divine Favor. It's about as greedy as he can possibly get. And that Meteor means that the ping comes down and is going to be able to take care of the Tarim.
There was a chance an Ice Block would have been drawn with the Dragon's Fury, and that could have made a huge difference for the entire board. But that didn't happen, and it seems like
that's all she wrote.
Hunterace is just sealing the deal in this game.
It was unfortunate that Perna, I believe, played that Redemption before Frostlich Jaina came into play, but because it was Redemption, it didn't really matter what Hunterace rolled there. He was able to get a ping on the revived minion. Like, as long as he didn't completely whiff on the Ice Block, he would have been able to get the ping follow-up anyway.
Wait, was the Murloc frozen? No.
No.
I could have just freezed the Water Elemental, just destroy the freezing effect, right?
Oh, you're right, yeah. He would, of course, have kept lifesteal, but would not have the freeze anymore.
Doesn't really matter since Udor doesn't have any weapons anymore. But, I mean, this turn doesn't really matter. But if that Water Elemental survives, that it might make a difference. But at the same time, like, I think Jaina is such a great spot that the Paladin might just not be able to push for any more damage. Right. Even if he deals any more damage, the Water Elementals will just get out of hand at some point very quickly, and then you don't have the damage output that will go over the lifesteal.
Yeah.
And how do you win from that?
Yeah, there's 7 cards left, plus 4 in hand, so once Hunterace deals with this board state, he has to beat 11 more cards, which... yeah, he can do that. So,
oh wait, there's one more Relying Blade.
So even if it's really weird. So even if he doesn't ever set up lethal for himself, Perna can't really win from this position because Hunterace can just kill every single thing he plays.
Wow.
Sick. All right, he goes out in style.
No way, Perna also became a level 60 Paladin.
No way.
On a loss.
Congrats.
That's gonna be in.
What a hero. That squares the series up 2 games to 2, and again, this is seeming to be the story of every single game of this series. Hunterace having to scrap his way out of some tricky-looking positions. Some games doing it successfully, some games not quite getting over the line. But that's kind of goes without saying when it's a very aggressive lineup against a full control lineup.
What golden card does he get for the level 60?
I don't remember.
Has to be a Murloc, right?
I'm not sure. I think the only one I might even be wrong about this, but I think it's like Golden Gnomish Inventor for level 60 Priest is the only one that I remember.
Because probably that's the last one you got.
No, I just remember a story of like I think when Gnomish was being played in Patron Warrior, and Life Coach, who's like a full golden role player with his decks, he wanted to make full gold Patron, but to get Gnomish Inventor, he had to level Priest to max level. So he said, don't worry about it, forget about it.
All right. Last game for this Mad Hunterace and Perna with the Priest versus Paladin, who will get into the semifinals of HCT Germany to stop. Wow. That's a bad opening hand for Perna. Did he keep the Divine Favor?
I didn't see. It would surprise me.
But I think he kept one card. Well, anyway, he got a curve at least for turn 1, so that's not bad.
Yep. Yeah, Divine Favor not super high value against Dragon Priest, honestly. I mean, it's Dragon Priest quite often, especially when they're going, toe-to-toe with another aggressive deck, is often quite low on cards in hand, like 3 or 4 cards max some of the time.
Yeah. The fact that now he has a tight color on turn 1 might be, let's say Hunterace has a Cleric. And that'd be a very hard decision to play the Cleric or not, since the Rockpool Hunter will just kill it instantly. Right?
Yes, and everything you just said is what that face on Hunterace is saying right now. That is what he's considering. We saw him lean back, and he just smiled to himself, because he knows this decision is everything. Coining Radiant Elemental can win the game if there's no Rockpool Hunter. It can lose the game if there is a Rockpool Hunter.
Oh. Close. But no cigar.
And again, that is where you would hope that Hunterace was paying more attention to the mulligan than we were. And he knows how many cards were kept, right? And then at that point, you have at least a little bit of influence on how likely your opponent is to have Rockpool Hunter in their opening hand.
Especially since also the Tide Color was the top deck.
Yes.
So that also influences his chances of not having, the answer.
But he got there, gets the happy news that Rockpool Hunter is not going to be the play. And now he has all the toys in the world to play with. And now if there's no Rallying Blades coming out from Perna, now he snowballs very hard with this Cabal Talon Priest.
I would love the Shadow Vision actually this turn.
Does it change anything?
Well, you can go for the shield.
I mean,
it doesn't change anything for the Rallying Blade, but the healer here doesn't either.
That's what I'm saying. Does healing the minion change anything in terms of keeping your Radiant Elemental alive? It doesn't, right?
Yeah, and you save mana this turn, and you also can get Cycle as well. You can also get a Potion of Madness.
Yeah.
For future turns. Well, we'll see. Because next turn, he has the curve, right? Turn 3 will be Talon Priest, turn 4 most likely just the Twilight Drake, and turn 5 just Operator.
Right. And then later on, he might be able to use Shadow Visions to go fishing for something more aggressive, like a Divine Spirit or an Inner Fire.
This is the perfect scenario for every Dragon Priest. You have a curve, you have stat bonuses from Talon Priest on the curve, and your opponent is a board-centric deck that relies on small minions, so practically every single dragon or minion from the Priest allows to trade it into another minion.
Right.
And even if that fails, Duskbreaker is the reset button.
Which, is it good enough here? Because if you don't use it here, then suddenly Blessing of Kings, War Leader, Gentle Megasaur, all of those kind of things actually become big threats to you that make your Dustbreaker a lot worse later on. But Hunterace disagrees. He is now going to take the turn to go fishing with the Shadow Visions. Picks up the Potion of Madness, which is huge, because now he can just clear the whole board without needing the Dustbreaker at all.
And he can even go for the Cleric and heal on the Elemental to get additional card draw.
Yep. Super likely to hit that, of course, because he's only playing Power Word Shield, Inner Fire, Divine Spirit, Potion of Madness, Silence. Those are the only spells that he plays in his deck, and the other copy of Shadow Visions. So
he goes on the heal for Talon Priest to have better trade next turn instead of the Radiant Elemental, which I find interesting because he still has access to spells in upcoming turns.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, he didn't. The Shadow Vision was just drawn from the hero power.
This is something that we haven't really talked about either. Just Bittertide Hydra jammed in his Paladin, which again is just a nod for wanting other big threats up against control decks, right? Like we're seeing it with Vicious Fledgling, we're seeing it with the Spellbreakers. Then Bittertide Hydra as well is a card that I've always been a huge fan of in aggro decks for punishing the slower decks. Just slam a huge pile of stats on turn 5, and most things aren't really equipped to deal with it.
Especially with the lack of Shadow Word Depths, as I said.
Right. Tarim's a great answer, though.
Yeah. It's kind of unlucky when you're a priest, and I mean, unlucky for the paladin that your opponent has suddenly a Tarim. Which is, I find it ironic that most cards that you play in a class has the best answers against them in your own class.
Right.
None of them are good. Redemption on the Hydra, kinda pointless.
Yep.
Eye for an Eye doesn't really do much. The Repentance might be a good answer for the Twilight Drake.
Yeah, and I really feel like Hydrologist has fallen off significantly as a card. It was everybody was super enthusiastic about it when it first came out. Just kind of that Dark Peddler thing, where it's just a card that gives you another utility that can fill in your curves and make different things happen for your deck. I think recently, the last few months, it's been the last Murloc in the deck. It's just been in there because you need that Murloc count to be what it is.
And you need the 2-drop.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this might be the board when you actually Dustbreaker. But at the same time, you can use the Tarim if that's not a Redemption. So you'd have to check for Redemption first. Nah, that's not good enough for Tarim, actually. Because your opponent still will have more minions than you. One attack from the Hydra will not really matter that much right now because it has 3 HP. So even if you get smashed for 8 damage to the face, that's not a worry for the priest right now.
You can go Shadow Visions back for the Potion of Madness again, right? Make a very similar play to what he did last time when it looked like a Dustbreaker turn.
You can even commit to double Elemental.
All right, looks like if he's making this attack, it will be the Dustbreaker turn.
Seems like it.
Drops the Elemental. It's looking extremely comfortable, to say the least, for Hunterace in this spot. Call to Arms is obviously one of the cards that can often change things, but the board is already contested. There isn't even the chance of the lucky Knife Juggler shot hitting the 3-1 in that position, which could have swung the board state a little bit, because there are no Knife Jugglers in Perna's deck.
Which I find interesting, because Paladin is the go-to deck for the Knife Juggler right now, especially with the introduction of Call to Arms.
Yes. It's making room for all of those, greedy anti-control cards, right? The Bittertide Hydras and the Spellbreakers and so on. Double Blessing of Kings as well. It's not always standard.
We have Potion of Madness, Divine Spirit, and Inner Fire. Is there lethal this turn? considering
He only
Boris
has
right now.
3 health minions in play, has 8
Well,
damage total.
he has Divine Spirit in hand, so he can go for 2 double. So that's 3, 6.
6 to 12, and
12.
then he has 15. There's a Righteous Protector in the way, though, so he would need the Potion of Madness as well.
Unlucky.
Hmm? And then he has to, of course, consider Noble Sacrifice and Redemption and all of those things that would make a mess of the lethal as well with the...
Maybe he should have attacked first, actually, to check the secret first, and
Maybe.
then play
Could
the
be right.
Shadow Vision.
You could be right.
And the Tarm at the end kind of seals the deal for next turn.
Yeah, the fact that he now has Divine Spirit in a fire combo and a 7 health minion on the board, it looks pretty promising. Perna does still have some counterplay, still has Blessing of Kings, but now you can see that thing I was talking about with Divine Favor. Like, it's going to be fine, don't get me wrong, but it's not the blowout he needs because his priest deck does just spend their hand.
The Blessing of Kings just fits so well against the Tarim.
Again, it's that thing you're talking about, right? Answers to strong cards in the same class.
Mm-hmm.
Blessing of Kings countering Tarim. Does seem to happen a lot.
Perna has this moral dilemma. Should I deploy a War Leader or should I just go for the Divine Favor? And honestly, I think the Divine Favor is the answer here because playing War Leader doesn't really do much. Your opponent already has answers to it. And if your opponent will read that this last card is a Divine Favor, he will just dump his hand. And you will not do much at all with it. Second Dustbreaker? I don't think there's even a point in taking it right now. But second Ysera is even worse, and Bondrake is expensive as hell.
Yeah, this is probably the most awkward turn that Hunterace has had to play this game. Everything else has felt pretty powerful, honestly. There's a couple of turns where he had choices between Shadow Vision's plays and Dustbreaker plays that were kind of hard plays to think about, but it was a choice between 2 good options. Whereas this turn seems to be a choice between 4 or 5 different mediocre options. The silver lining to all of that is that Perna is out of cards and is going to have no board state at the end of this turn if Hunterace wants it that way.
For a second, I thought he will be committing to Divine Spirit on the Twilight Drake, but at the same time, you don't really have to when your opponent's already at 15.
Mm-hmm.
Since you don't really need to commit to a huge threat with the Divine Spirit in a fire combo, especially since Paladin also plays double Spellbreakers.
Right. As the Divine Favor, and again, I think this was part of the consideration of Hunterace's play last turn. Just spent everything that he had, just kept the Ysera and Dustbreaker in hand that were uncastable, dumped the Divine Spirit in a fire, made sure that Divine Favor could not get his opponent back into the game, as slim as that opportunity even was with how far behind he is. Hunterace has really just been really, really strong this series in terms of covering his opponent's options.
Mm-hmm. It all boils down to turn 2 when he played the Elemental, and that was the winning play.
Yeah. And there's, with all the fantastic plays that he has made this series, and there have been several of them, that is really just a feeling thing, You just have to say, okay, well, if he has it, he has it. If he doesn't, he doesn't. And that looks like Perna is giving it up, and quite rightly so, because the Potion of Madness comes off the top. Hunterace puts in a spectacular performance to take the series 3-2, and he is going to find himself in the top 4 of our first European tour stop of the new year.
That is correct. And also, he was on the back foot the entire match. He lost the first game, then he got the draw 1-1, then he lost another match.
Right.
And Perna was on a match point for 2 games in a row. So that kind of feels bad when you cannot just close it out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, well, someone has to be a winner. So
Yes, and a very deserved winner. I think Raven and I have both called out Hunterace to potentially win this whole thing when we were asked for a pick, and his play so far has backed that up, and he is now joining us to my right. Hunterace, congratulations. Very well played. When you went into that series, how did you feel about the lineups matching up? Because he was playing aggro, which is probably good for you, but he was playing very greedy aggro with like Hydras and so on.
Yeah, to be honest, I wasn't that confident going into this matchup. I didn't really get to test a lot against this lineup. First, I thought it was like a really good matchup for me because I just like initially so I run like full aggro. But then I just started looking into the list and then like super tech towards all the control decks, right?
Oh, just move the mic a little bit closer.
Sorry.
There you go. Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like the series in general kind of sketched for me because I missed like all the matchups. I queued like every single matchup I didn't want to queue.
Okay.
So I'm really happy in Perna in the end because I think it was super hard for me to get a win with the Priest against this lineup.
What do you think about the Warlock being open in the entire match, right? Because that's the first time I actually didn't see a ban on the Warlock class.
Oh, so in the ban phase, it was kind of interesting because I was kind of unsure what he was going to ban. I was like 50-50 if he was going to ban my mage or my paladin. And I felt like it kind of mattered what I banned also because in the case of him banning my mage, I wanted to ban his Warlock. And in the case of him banning my paladin, I wanted to ban his mage.
Right.
So it was kind of a mind game there, and I ended up winning that. And I could have actually just decided the series in the end. It's a really big deal.
So during the games against the Paladin, how much were you thinking about Divine Favor with the plays that you were making? Because I think there were several turns where like I thought you were deliberately like dumping cards from hand to try and play around it.
Yeah, I tried to like play as curve efficiently as possible, like not greeting too much with my artificers.
Right.
And also, yeah, in the end, I also just wanted to get it all out because the only way I lost was him just getting an insane Divine Favor and just hitting Tarim and everything.
Right. Because there was like a turn where you went like Artificer Polymorph, which was like the only way you could play two cards that turn. And you just like hit a 2/3 with it. I thought that was really...
Also that turn, I really wanted to Geist the turn afterwards.
Yeah,
I really wanted one more turn to greed. Because then I could have set up the Artificer Blizzard after that.
Right.
I have a question when it comes to the trade that you made with the Sabertooth, because that's something that we caught after you made the play. You had the option to trade into the Cleric or into the Spellbreaker, so you leave your Sabertooth at 1 HP. What was your main reason for that?
I
was
wanted
that
to play around
Jaina?
Mind Control.
And Mind Control, Jaina, and also, what was the other option? There was a third.
There was two. Mind Control, and then you can like Jaina coin ping your own token.
Mind Control. In the end, I was like, I didn't want to concede because maybe I fucked up, like misread something or something. But I was 100% sure he had Mind Control because he got it from the Raven, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, really well played. Not much more really to ask apart from, you know, how do you feel about, obviously you see the bracket now, so you know potentially who your next opponent is out of two. Like, have you looked at the
Demon, right?
Have you looked at the matchups?
I think that Odemian has like a fairly good lineup against me. He has the Evolve Shaman though, which I fairly like the trio. I think all my decks are very favored against Evolve Shaman. And Boston has the same lineup as Perna, I believe. It's just a bit less greedy.
Okay.
So I'm fine with both, to be honest. So yeah, I think it's gonna. We'll see.
Any more questions?
I'm done. Impressive play.
Yeah, congratulations. I was very impressed. I picked you for this tournament, so I'm rooting for you. Hope you go all the way.
Yeah, I feel like I have a lot of pressure this tournament. Kind of nervous.
I don't know if you saw the results of Raven's poll that he put on Twitter either, but like 87% of people picked you or something like that. Yeah. So yeah, feels
like
good,
20
man.
followers of Raven.
Yeah, there you go.